Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the stone-cold stillness of a medieval monastery. It's pre-dawn, too early for anyone with sense, and you're already up barefoot, wrapped in a coarse wool robe that feels like sandpaper soaked in fog. The floor beneath your feet is stone-worn and unforgiving, and even though you just left your straw-stuffed mattress, you feel as though you never really slept. Maybe it was the chanting in your dreams. Maybe it was the suspiciously loud mice in the beams. A heavy bell tolls low and solemn. It vibrates in your chest like thunder wrapped in iron, and you follow the sound toward the chapel along a narrow corridor lit only by flickering torches. The air is thick with cold and incense, and that faint scent of damp books and boiled cabbage that never quite goes away. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the time you hit play. I love seeing where and when people listen in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You join the other monks, each one as bleary-eyed as the next, forming a quiet procession into the darkened church. No one's talking, not because they're too tired, but because talking isn't really allowed. Instead, there's a kind of reverent choreography, heads bowed, feet shuffling, robes rustling like dry leaves. You take your place on a hard wooden bench that feels like it was carved by someone with a grudge. The chanting begins Latin verses in a low, rhythmic murmur. It's oddly soothing, like Gregorian white noise. You don't understand most of it, but that's fine. Neither did half the monks in the early years. You hum along in your head, pretending you're part of the choir, and wonder if anyone would notice if you dozed off mid-Ave Maria. This first service of the day is called Matins, and yes, it starts way before sunrise. It's followed almost immediately by lauds, another round of psalms and prayers. You think about coffee, but then remember that coffee hasn't made it to Europe yet. Instead, you get spiritual clarity, supposedly. One mainstream fact: monastic schedules were designed around prayer, not productivity. Monks divided their day into 8 canonical hours, each marked by specific prayers. This structure didn't just shape their routine, it defined their lives, almost like setting daily alarms by God's clock. A quirky tidbit to ensure they always woke up on time for prayers, even in total darkness. Some monasteries employed waker monks, whose job was literally to go around prodding the others awake with a stick. Not exactly your dream alarm clock, but effective. You stifle a yawn and try to focus on the flickering candlelight, the faint trail of smoke curling upward like a whisper. Some of the older monks are swaying gently, eyes closed, not asleep, just meditating very convincingly. You take mental notes. Eventually, the prayers wind down. The bell rings again, gentler this time. There's a bit more movement now, a shuffle of sandals and whisper of fabric as everyone files out. It's still dark outside, but you can sense the faintest gray just starting to line the horizon. You shuffle back through the stone halls, wondering if you'll get food soon. Your stomach makes a noise that echoes slightly, and you glance around, embarrassed. No one reacts. They've all been there. You pass the scriptorium, closed for now, but its heavy wooden doors whisper promises of ink-stained hours to come. Then the herb garden, dim and sleepy, but you catch the earthy tang of rosemary and thyme rising from the damp soil. The monastery may feel like a timeless capsule, but it breathes, slowly, deliberately. Historians still argue whether early monastic communities truly followed their rule to the letter, especially when it came to waking up at ridiculous hours. Some suggest the night prayers were often shortened or skipped altogether during winter. You can't blame them. Waking up in the dark, cold, and silence of a stone monastery isn't just inconvenient, it's borderline heroic. Still, there's something oddly peaceful in it too. You've barely spoken, barely moved, and yet your thoughts feel clearer. Maybe it's the rhythm, maybe it's the routine, maybe it's the early signs of sleep deprivation. You reach the refectory just as the sky hints at turning blue. Another bell rings, this one a little more chipper, like even it knows breakfast is next. You shuffle into the refectory, still wrapped in the same robe that somehow manages to be both scratchy and clingy, like a wet sheep with personal space issues. The room is simple, long wooden tables, narrow benches, and stone walls that do a remarkable job of keeping in exactly zero heat. There's no bustling chatter, no clinking of cutlery, no morning rush. Just the faint creak of wood and the low hum of another monk reading from scripture, while you all pretend you're paying attention and not just thinking about porridge. Your place is set a wooden bowl, a wooden spoon, and a generous helping of, something beige. It's gruel, again. Maybe oats, maybe barley, maybe just whatever they found at the bottom of the storage barrel. It's warm, though, and after those early prayers, even something that looks like mashed lint tastes almost comforting. There's bread, too. Dense, slightly sour, and heavy enough to double as a doorstop. But it's food, and that's more than a few villagers nearby might have today. You chew in silence, surrounded by fellow monks with equally blank expressions. One bites too hard and flinches. Someone must have forgotten to check for pebbles in the flour again. It happens. The monk reading scripture continues without pause, reciting from a worn Latin text that's at least twice as old as anyone here. It's meant to inspire you while you eat. But let's be honest, you're mostly just trying not to spill on yourself. No one talks, but the unspoken bond of early morning mutual exhaustion is strong. Mainstream historical fact. Monastic meals were designed not just for nourishment, but for discipline. You ate in silence often, while listening to biblical readings to keep your mind focused on the divine and not say how badly you wanted cinnamon. And you do want cinnamon, desperately. But spices are expensive and reserved for guests or feast days, maybe. The monks wouldn't tell you even if they were hoarding some. Secrecy and self-denial go hand in hand. You glance up at a small painted fresco near the ceiling, angels' halos, maybe a sheep or two, all very solemn. A few are chipped or faded, but their eyes still follow you like they know about the bread crust you just slipped into your sleeve for later. Don't worry, we won't tell. There's an odd comfort in the quiet routine. No decisions to make, no debates about what to wear, no endless news feed to scroll through while chewing. Just you, your bowl, and a 1,000-year-old quote about humility floating in the air like early morning fog. A quirky little tidbit. Some monasteries actually employed a refectorian, a monk, in charge of organizing meals and making sure no one under any circumstances forgot the salt. But get this, salt was sometimes considered a luxury. If you had a lot of it, you were practically a rock star, or at least a salt star. Once breakfast ends, the bowls are collected with quiet efficiency. No one claps or thanks the cook. There's no cook, technically just rotating duty. One day you're eating the gruel, the next you're making it. Either way, it's still gruel. You return your bowl and spoon to a wash station where another monk, eyes puffy with sleep, scrubs each one with the kind of concentration usually reserved for open-heart surgery. Cleanliness might not be glamorous, but it's holy. Historians still argue whether monastic communities really thrived on this sparse diet, or whether they secretly snuck extra meals. Some archaeological digs suggest a surprisingly meaty reality: bones of pigs and geese found in places they weren't supposed to be. So it's entirely possible that Brother Benedict over there is hiding a roasted chicken leg in his robe. You'd never know, unless you followed the smell. Back in the corridor, you wipe your hands on your robe again and head toward your next task. It's still early morning, the sun now filtering through narrow stained glass windows in scattered hues of red and blue. The silence around you feels less sleepy now, more contemplative. Or maybe everyone's just mentally bracing for another day of strict schedules and lukewarm turnips. And yet, something about this place calms you. The rhythm of it, the way the day unfolds, without surprises or alarms or emails. You don't have to be anywhere but here. You just exist, and in the monastery, that's enough. As you walk past a cloister garden where morning dew clings to mossy stones, you catch a whiff of lavender. It's planted in neat little rows, tended with care, and its scent cuts through the earthy dampness, a small joy in a world of solemn repetition. By now, the other monks have all dispersed to their duties, some toward the scriptorium, others to the gardens, still others to care for animals or maintain the chapel. You head toward your assigned station. The bell that dictates the monastery's every move hasn't rung yet, but you feel it coming. You always do. And maybe that's the strangest part of all. You've only been here a day, but it already feels like weeks. Like you've always known the feel of wool robes and stone underfoot. Like this has always been your world, and always will be. You pause just outside the cloister, the last bit of your breakfast bread tucked safely in your sleeve. A small rebellion, a small comfort, in a place where everything belongs to the community, including your time, your thoughts, and even your food. This tiny, slightly stale corner of bread feels like a treasure. You smile to yourself, and for a moment, the bell doesn't seem so loud. You shuffle along the uneven stone path toward the vegetable garden, that blessed patch of earth where at least something makes sense. Plant water, wait, harvest. The morning mist clings to the hem of your robe as you cross the cloister, ducking under an archway, weathered by hundreds of years of silent footfalls and patient prayer. It smells like thyme and cabbage and slightly damp earth, the kind of smell that says we're humble, but we grow things. You're on garden duty today. Lucky you. It's back-breaking work, but at least it's outside. You're not stuck illuminating manuscripts in a cramped room, inhaling candle smoke and correcting Brother Thomas's spelling errors. Again, the garden sits just past the chapel, framed by crumbling walls and lined with low hedges. Inside, neat rows of leeks, onions, garlic, and herbs stretch out like a checkerboard of humble nourishment. No exotic fruit, no dazzling flowers, just plants that know how to survive hard soil and harder winters. You grab a dull iron hoe from the tool shed, which is basically a shed-shaped pile of wood barely holding itself together with the will of Saint Isidore. Mainstream historical fact. Monks played a key role in preserving and cultivating agricultural knowledge. Their gardens weren't just for food. They were laboratories of medieval botany with herbs for healing and vegetables chosen for both practicality and penance. A good monk knew his cabbage from his comfrey. You start to weed a patch near the fence, careful not to disturb the carrots, those little orange sticks of resistance that somehow thrive even in clay soil. Your back protests immediately, your knees creak, your robe catches on a thorny bush that probably wasn't even planted there on purpose. A squirrel stares at you with judgment in its tiny eyes. The work is rhythmic, almost meditative. Hoe, pull, pat, shift. Dirt collects under your fingernails, and for once, no one cares. There's something quietly satisfying about clearing space for growth, even if the growth in question tastes like mild disappointment. A few birds squabble in a nearby tree. You glance up just in time to spot a starling take off with a bit of straw in its beak, likely for a nest built right under the monastery roof where no one's dared to check for years. The birds probably have better insulation than you do. A quirky tidbit. In some monastic gardens, particularly Benedictine ones, monks actually attempted to grow plants they'd read about in ancient texts, even if they didn't quite know what the plant did. Some even tried to grow mandrake, a root said to scream when pulled from the earth. You haven't heard any screaming roots yet, but you're not entirely convinced that weird tuber you saw yesterday wasn't trying to whisper at you. You straighten up for a moment and stretch hands on your lower back like a monk-shaped croquet mallet. The sun peeks over the stone wall, warm on your face now. Not hot, just warm enough to make you forget for 1 second that your breakfast consisted of watery gruel and questionable bread. The bell chimes. Not the big bell that's for prayer, but the smaller garden bell. It signals a change of hands. Another monk will come take over your spot. You'll swap tasks. You sigh, your shoulders releasing tension you didn't even realize you were carrying. Historians still argue whether monasteries functioned more like spiritual retreats or agrarian engines. Some argue that they were early prototypes of sustainable farms, while others suggest that monks had so many lay brothers and helpers that they rarely got dirt under their own nails. But from where you're standing, hoe in hand, mud on feet, it definitely feels like you're getting the full peasant light experience. You head to the herb patch next. Lavender, sage, chamomile, the good stuff. Not for seasoning, don't be ridiculous. No one's getting herbed potatoes around here. These are for healing. Poultices, teas, salves. You pick a few sprigs, carefully bundling them with twine you found in the shed, probably last used in the 1100s. As you work, you notice the small signs of a monk's quiet rebellion. Someone's shaped a rosemary bush into a crude fish. Another monk has carefully outlined a snail-sized labyrinth with pebbles tucked in the corner of the parsley bed. Art expression, or maybe just boredom, but here it stays unnoticed by the prior, for now. You wipe your hands on your robe, which now looks like it lost a fight with a compost bin. The wind picks up, fluttering the leaves, and making your robe billow just slightly like a heroic figure in a very low-budget historical drama. You strike a pose. No one sees, probably for the best. It's almost time to switch again. You gather the weeds into a basket, a collection of the unwanted and overgrown. They'll be thrown into a compost heap behind the wall. Nothing wasted. Everything turned into something useful eventually. Kind of poetic if you think about it. You pass another monk on his way to take over your station. You nod. He nods. Neither of you says a word, partly because of the silence rule and partly because talking would require effort neither of you has. Back through the cloister you go past sunlit arches and damp flagstones, your body humming with the kind of tired that makes lunch feel like the second coming. You spot Brother Anselm trying to chase a goat out of the herb patch again. The goat naturally ignores him, and you think maybe this life isn't so bad. It's quiet, predictable, no taxes, no tick-tock, just lavender, mud, and the occasional screaming vegetable. You reach the doorway to the scriptorium with a sense of reluctant resignation, your arms still sore from garden duty, and your robe trailing mud like some medieval fashion statement. The wooden door creaks open with its usual theatrical flair, loud enough to startle any nearby dust motes into dance. Inside, the light is dim and golden, filtered through narrow windows of wavy glass, their surfaces frosted by time and the occasional pigeon streak. Candles flicker from iron sconces, throwing long shadows that stretch like lazy cats across the stone floor. The scent in here is a heady blend of beeswax ink, old parchment, and ambition. You inhale it like someone inhaling strong coffee before a very long meeting because that's exactly what this is. You're about to copy letters for hours. Letters you didn't write. Letters you can't question. Letters you will probably dream about later in an aggressively scripted nightmare. You take your seat at a long wooden desk shared with two other monks, who nod silently in that ancient way that means may the ink gods be with you. In front of you lies a manuscript in progress. Someone's been working on it already, probably Brother Martin, who dots his I's with an unsettling amount of flair. You eye the bottle of iron gall ink, which stains everything it touches, including your soul. Next to it sits your quill, a feather sharpened with alarming precision. You dip it carefully, say a small mental prayer to avoid spilling on the vellum, and begin. Mainstream historical fact monks were the main producers of written texts during the Middle Ages. Before the printing press, every book, whether Bible herbal or wildly inaccurate geography, was hand-copied by people like you. It took months, even years, to complete a single volume. Some monks trained for decades just to master lettering styles like Carolingian minuscule, and you thought your handwriting was bad. You trace each letter slowly, deliberately, in principio, the beginning of something or other. You try not to smudge the drying ink with your sleeve, but let's be honest, you will. Again, outside a bell tolls, not yours. A reminder that time marches on even when your quill gets stuck in the M. You sigh and press forward. Your hand cramps by the third paragraph. You shake it out and sneak a glance at Brother Aldrich's work across the desk. He's illustrating a capital letter L with a dragon eating its own tail. It's both intricate and mildly disturbing. You raise an eyebrow. He smirks. Monastic humor, subtle, weird, and probably frowned upon. A quirky tidbit. Some monks, bored or rebellious, added bizarre little doodles in the margins of manuscripts. We're talking snails jousting with knights' cats playing lutes, and one memorable illustration of a monk mooning a bishop. Historians still puzzle over whether these were acts of satire, secret protest, or just medieval memes. You, personally, are tempted to draw a tiny donkey wearing a crown in the bottom corner of this page just for your future amusement. You glance up and blink your eyes, momentarily disoriented by the distance beyond the parchment. The flickering light makes the walls seem to pulse. A drop of wax hits the table beside your elbow, almost poetic. Or threatening, hard to tell. Historians still argue whether most monks actually enjoyed this aspect of their duties. Was manuscript copying seen as a noble labor of devotion, or was it a tedious burden reserved for those with the steadiest hands and the worst luck? Some evidence suggests that senior monks delegated the task to younger initiates as a sort of rite of passage, or perhaps punishment for talking during prayer or drawing donkeys. You push through another passage, translating Latin with the slow, confident despair of someone who barely remembers the case endings. The text today is theological, something about divine love or possibly divine furniture. It's a little unclear, and you're too tired to ask Brother Gregory for clarification. Gregory gets very excited about theology and very loud about footnotes. Midway through a sentence, your quill splits. A tiny feather tip flutters off like it's done with this nonsense. You mutter a silent curse, a wholesome one, of course, something like fiddlesticks or by St. Bede's sandals, and reach for the knife to reshape the point. Scrape, scrape, test scrape. Ink, try again. Better. A distant thunderclap echoes. Rain, probably. The scriptorium's roof leaks in at least 4 spots, and if you're lucky, you're not under any of them. Brother Matthew, less fortunate now, has a wet blotch right where his psalm commentary begins. He looks up, shrugs, and keeps writing. Saints are patient, or maybe just resigned. As your mind wanders, because it always does, you start imagining what future generations might think when they read these manuscripts. Will they marvel at your penmanship, laugh at your marginal doodles, or just use it as kindling for some rustic dinner? You settle somewhere between forgotten hero and ink-stained nobody, which honestly isn't the worst way to go out. Hours pass in a haze of letters and flickering light. The rhythmic scratching of quills becomes a kind of music, a soft, dry rustle echoing under ancient beams. You get into a groove, and for a while it's almost pleasant. Monastic flow state, just you, the ink, the page, and a mild sense of impending carpal tunnel. Eventually, the bell rings the signal for prayer or food. You can't remember which. You stretch fingers stiff and shoulders sore. Across the table, Brother Aldrich has successfully completed a dragon-riding rabbit illustration. You give him a slow clap. He bows with faux solemnity. The prior walks by just then, and both of you immediately return to your serious monk faces. You roll up your scroll cap, the ink, and wipe your hands on a cloth that probably used to be white. Outside, the sky has darkened, rain pattering on the courtyard stones. You welcome it. Fewer chores when it's wet, unless, of course, the goat has escaped again. Which it has. You hear the bleating. You follow the sound of distant bleating like some wool-obsessed detective, your sandaled feet slipping slightly on the wet flagstones. The air smells of fresh rain, wet straw, and that unmistakable barnyard funk that makes you question whether spiritual enlightenment is worth goat duty. You round the cloister corner, and there it is, Brother Thomas's prized goat Matilda perched triumphantly on a barrel like she's reenacting her own passion play. She locks eyes with you in that unsettling goat way, pupils horizontal, expression smug. You sigh deeply. This is not your first goat retrieval. Still in your ink-stained robe, you wade into the muddy courtyard, arms out, voice low and soothing. "Come now, Matilda," you whisper as if you're coaxing a fussy toddler to nap. "Let's not make a scene in front of the novices." She ignores you entirely, choosing instead to hop down with all the grace of a furry acrobat and trot off toward the herb garden. You give chase, trying not to slip on the slick grass as your sandals squelch with every step. A rooster nearby watches this entire performance with silent judgment. Eventually, after some careful coaxing and the strategic offering of an old turnip, you manage to get her back into her pen. Brother Thomas will owe you a plum, or at least a nod of gratitude later, monastic currency. You secure the latch and wipe your hands on your robe again, adding goat wrangler to your already exhausting resume. Mainstream historical fact. Monasteries weren't just spiritual havens, they were also self-sufficient farms. Every monk had practical chores beyond prayer, and many tended livestock. Goats, sheep, pigs, even bees, us each played a role in the monastery economy. Cheese, wool, honey, and tanned leather often ended up as valuable trade goods, helping to fund everything from repairs to new manuscripts. You, of course, mostly just get bleated at. Back inside, you pass Brother Hildebrand and his posse of ducks. Yes, ducks. The monastery keeps them for eggs, pest control, and light comic relief. They trail him like tiny waddling disciples. Occasionally one escapes and waddles straight into the chapel, usually during the quietest moment of Mass. You head toward the laundry area next, though laundry might be too generous a term. It's more like a damp patch beside a stream, where monks attempt to convince dirt to release its death grip on wool. You're not technically assigned here today, but your robe smells like a mixture of goat candle wax and ancient ink, so here we are. You kneel beside the stream and begin scrubbing. The cold water bites your fingers, and the soap is more lye than anything else. It smells vaguely like medieval disappointment. Your robe resists cleaning with the stubbornness of a theological debate. Nearby, Brother Luke is muttering something about ink stains being divine marks of purpose. You suspect he just doesn't want to scrub. A quirky tidbit. Some monks wore the same robe for weeks or even months at a time, depending on their order and available resources. Bathing was considered healthy by some orders, but excessive cleanliness was also occasionally frowned upon, as if too much scrubbing might scrub away your humility. Historians still argue whether bathing habits varied drastically between different monastic communities, or whether everyone simply tolerated the smell out of shared suffering. You rinse the robe and wring it out with frozen fingers. It now looks slightly cleaner and smells marginally less like goat. You hang it on a line strung between two apple trees, where it flutters like a defeated flag of monastic neutrality. You throw on your spare stiff cold and still a little damp from last week. Next, you're sent to the granary, a long stone building with arched doorways and the constant scent of old grain and mouse ambition. You grab a broom and sweep slowly, methodically, trying not to kick up dust or accidentally disturb the lurking cat who believes this place is hers by divine right. She stares at you, tail flicking, as you move around her without question. A bell tolls faintly in the distance, another hour gone. You can't remember if it's prime or sext or just keep sweeping a clock, but you keep at it anyway. The rhythm is oddly comforting. You sweep, dust dances, you sneeze. The cat judges. As you work, you wonder about the life of monks who came before you. Did they also chase goats, battle ink, and wrestle with soapless laundry? Probably. Did they question their calling while elbow deep in grain husks? Almost certainly. Yet here you are hundreds of years later, still in the same stone walls, following a rhythm older than memory. Historians still argue whether the repetitive labor of monastic life was a blessing or a burden. Some say it fostered mindfulness, aligning the body with the spiritual discipline of the rule of Saint Benedict. Others argue it simply kept restless hands too busy to sin. Either way, your hands are very busy and very sore. You finish the granary sweep and head to the storage cellar, where salted fish and root vegetables live eternal lives in the dark. It smells like pickled regret. You double-check the barrels and make notes on their contents with a piece of chalk. Carrots, 3 barrels. Cabbage, 2 barrels. Mystery root, abundant. On the way out, you nearly collide with Brother Jerome, who's balancing a wheel of cheese like it's a relic of St. Augustine. You help him stabilize it and receive a grateful grunt in return, language of the heart. At long last, the bell for the evening meal rings. You head toward the refectory robes, still damp hands, raw, and face smeared with something that might be soot goat hair or philosophical despair. But there will be bread, maybe a little cheese, and the gentle sound of your brothers slurping soup in solemn silence. As you pass through the cloister, you spot the sunset burning low across the fields beyond the wall. The sky glows a bruised purple. The wind hums through the arches, and Matilda the goat bleats once softly, as if saying, "Well done, monk." You bow slightly. She ignores you. Your sandals whisper across the refectory stones as you step into the long hall. The space feels cool and hollow, dimly lit by narrow windows that let in the last amber streaks of sunset. Wooden tables stretch down each side like rows of obedient pupils, each set with wooden bowls, pewter spoons, and the occasional crumb left behind from earlier clumsiness. You ease into your usual place on the bench, trying not to creak. As you sit, through the bench creaks anyway, because humility, it seems, includes poor carpentry. A small loaf of bread sits in front of you. It's dry, but honest. Beside it, a bowl of thin onion soup steams gently, its smell reassuringly underwhelming. No one speaks. A reader stands at a raised lectern in the corner, softly intoning passages from the Rule of Saint Benedict, or possibly one of those long saints' lives where someone fasts for 40 years and then dies in their sleep. You chew your bread slowly, the crust rough against your teeth, your spoon clicking gently against the bowl. Mainstream historical fact. In most medieval monasteries, meals were eaten in silence. A monk would be appointed as the daily reader, and others would dine in stillness, letting the words of scripture or sometimes strict monastic rules nourish the soul while the body managed with soup. Eating was not supposed to be a pleasure, but a necessity, though. When Brother Sebastian accidentally dumps lentils down his robe again, you suppress a smile. Even necessity can be comedic. You sneak a glance at Brother Michael across the table. He's trying to cut his cheese with a spoon again. Why he doesn't ask for a knife no one knows. Perhaps it's penance or pride, or both. You stifle a chuckle as his spoon bends slightly. You shift your weight and try not to think too much about tomorrow's garden duty. Last time you managed to plant leeks upside down. Brother Arnold said it was a spiritual metaphor. You hope the leeks agree. As the reading concludes and bowls are quietly gathered, you shuffle out with the others and head toward Compline night prayers. The chapel glows with candlelight, flickering gold across the ancient stones. You take your place, the smell of beeswax thick in the air, and begin to chant. The words tumble out softly like lullabies dressed in Latin. A quirky tidbit. Some monks were known to fall asleep during Compline. There are written accounts and cheeky marginal notes in manuscripts suggesting that Brother so-and-so snores through matins again, or he who naps in prayer dreams of angels or cheese. While not encouraged, this low-grade dozing wasn't exactly scandalous. When your day starts before sunrise and ends long after sunset, The eyelids have their own opinion. Historians still argue whether strict adherence to prayer schedules was consistently maintained across all monasteries. Some evidence suggests certain abbots allowed flexibility in practice, especially in rural monasteries during busy harvest seasons. Others upheld the rule with a rigidity that made even the sheep nervous. After Compline, the monastery slips into silence. Great silence, it's called. From now until morning, no words will be spoken unless absolutely necessary. You wander back to your cell, your footsteps muffled by woven rushes on the floor. The night air smells faintly of lavender and wet earth. You pause outside your door and glance up. The stars above the cloister roof are beginning to show pinpricks of quiet in an otherwise cloudy sky. You whisper a final prayer, more of a thought than a sound, and slip inside. Your cell is modest, to put it kindly. A narrow bed with straw mattress, a single blanket, a wooden stool, and a shelf with 2 precious books, your copy of the Psalms and a rather battered herbal manuscript that smells suspiciously like elderflower and mildew. You sit on the stool and begin to write a short entry in your daily log, something the abbot encourages, though not everyone complies. You try to keep yours honest. Though tonight's note reads, simply goat, again. You snuff the candle. The room darkens immediately, the walls folding in around you like arms. The chill settles in your bones, but you've learned to welcome it. You stretch beneath the blanket and lie still. Outside, a distant owl hoots. Inside, your breath begins to slow. But just as your eyes close, you hear it. Scratching, persistent, tiny, rhythmic. You groan softly, sit up and peer into the shadows. Nothing, just darkness and the faint glint of your inkwell on the shelf. You lie back down. The scratching resumes. You stare at the ceiling. Mouse, you whisper under your breath, already planning a small bread bribe for tomorrow. Eventually, the sound fades. Or maybe you drift. The straw rustles softly beneath you as you exhale and let sleep claim you for a few short hours before the night bell rings. Monastic life is quiet but never boring. It's an endless dance of ritual and responsibility with just enough absurdity to keep you awake, unless, of course, you're Brother Gregory, who is absolutely snoring through great silence again. You stir in the early dark, not because you want to, but because the night bell insists. Its low, dragging toll cuts through sleep like a blunt chisel groaning from the bell tower with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for forgotten laundry or tax forms. You groan back internally because great silence still holds. The room is cold, the air bites, and your blanket somehow is on the floor. You fumble into your robe, feet sliding into sandals that never quite dry. The chill of the flagstone floor humbles you instantly. No one struts at this hour. You open your door and step into the corridor where a few other monks shuffle like ghosts in oversized wool. The chapel looms ahead. Its doors are always open physically and metaphorically. You settle into your seat, which creaks like it, too, would rather be sleeping. The flicker of candlelight throws the shadows of the choir stalls up against the old stone walls, tall and swaying like giant saints with questionable posture. You join the chants, matins, the first prayers of the new day, your voice low, uncertain, still waking. Latin syllables roll over your tongue like marbles. Some of them you understand. Most of them you fake well enough. Mainstream historical fact. Matins were one of the canonical hour-specific prayer times that structured a monk's entire day, beginning around 200 or 3 a.m. They were meant to reflect spiritual discipline, sacrifice, and constant connection with the divine. In practice, they also served to completely eradicate any sense of sleeping in. It's hard to sin when you're exhausted. The service continues, and though your stomach growls quietly, your mind is slowly finding its rhythm. Repetition is your ally. The same psalms, the same responses day after day. Some monks claimed it trained the soul for heaven. Others suspected it just made your memory incredibly good at obscure biblical trivia. You close your eyes during one of the longer responsories, not quite sleeping but hovering and alert, sort of dreaming like a cat in sunlight. A single cough echoes from somewhere behind you. Brother Thomas? It always is. When the final amen is sung, you rise again. It's still pitch dark outside, but the routine continues. You return briefly to your cell to wash up. There's a jug of cold water waiting not out of punishment, but because warm water is a luxury reserved for royalty or people who live past the 19th century. You splash your face and inhale sharply. That'll wake anyone. Breakfast is soon. Don't get excited. You make your way back to the refectory and take your seat. No candles this time. Dawn will handle that. In the dimness, you squint at the contents of your bowl. It appears to be yesterday's gruel, reincarnated, with slightly more oats and slightly less enthusiasm. You eat slowly, methodically, trying to identify any exciting texture. Was that a raisin, number, just a lump? False alarm, a quirky tidbit. Some monasteries allowed beer for breakfast. Not ale, not wine, but small beer. A weak, mildly alcoholic drink brewed with low fermentation and high hydration. It was safer than water and provided calories. You imagine explaining this to a modern nutritionist. Yes, I hydrate exclusively with medieval breakfast beer. They would faint politely. Historians still argue whether all monasteries kept this rigid pre-dawn prayer and breakfast schedule, or whether rural abbeys had more flexible approaches depending on season and necessity. Some evidence suggests monks in colder climates occasionally delayed matins until closer to sunrise in winter. Others argue such mercy was rare. After breakfast, you make your way into the scriptorium. The room is warmer now, with morning light seeping in through glazed windows, diffused and soft. This is where you'll spend the next several hours copying, correcting, sometimes even illuminating texts. The desk is angled, your quills are trimmed, your ink carefully poured. Today you're marking finishing a copy of the Psalter, and your eyes already ache at the thought. You settle in. The first few lines go smoothly. Your Latin is crisp, your letters even. Then ink blob, right in the middle of the word Dominus. You sigh and reach for a scrap to blot. Across the room, Brother Raymond sneezes directly onto his parchment. He stares at it in horror, then at the ceiling as if hoping for divine correction. It's easy to imagine this job being peaceful, and sometimes it is. But mostly, it's back-breaking, finger-cramping labor, hunched for hours in silence. Your only excitement, the occasional decorative initial. You take an indulgent moment to sketch a grumpy rabbit in the margin. Maybe the abbot won't notice. Maybe he'll laugh. Maybe he'll assign you 3 extra psalms in penance. You take the risk. Outside bells chime. Again terse the mid-morning prayer. You mark your place cap, your ink, and rise with the others. It's time to chant again. As the words roll from your tongue once more, you feel the repetitive rhythm anchoring you. In a world without clocks, without scrolling timelines, your life is ruled by bells and psalms and the smell of Brother Raymond's unfortunate sneeze. And honestly, it's not the worst. The cold has lifted a little. Your hands no longer ache. Your stomach is at peace. And the chant, despite its age and austerity, begins to sound strangely like a lullaby, one that just happens to be performed standing up before noon in full wool. After terce, your feet shuffle not to rest, but toward the outdoors labor calls. As a monk, you may have imagined a life full of prayer, parchment, and peaceful humming in cloisters, but surprise manual labor is a cornerstone of your monastic vows. Ora et labora, pray and work, wasn't just a slogan. It was your whole life on a loop. And right now that loop involves weeding the herb garden. You wrap your cloak a little tighter against the wind and step into the monastery courtyard. The garden's low stone walls trap a bit of sun, enough to make the rosemary perk up at least. You kneel beside Brother Ulrich, who has already lost a battle to a thistle, and looks like he may seek vengeance. Your hands plunge into the soil, earthy cold and surprisingly sticky. You tug at stubborn roots, thin the carrots, and pinch the basil leaves just right. Across the path, a younger novice is arguing quietly with a beet. The beet is winning. Mainstream historical fact. Many monastic orders, particularly the Benedictines, insisted that all monks perform physical labor each day. This wasn't just about humility, it also helped monasteries remain self-sufficient. They grew their own food, made their own beer, even raised animals. You're not above scooping chicken droppings or scrubbing pig troughs if that's where you're assigned. The rhythm of gardening is oddly meditative. A weed here, a prayer there. You find yourself humming an old chant under your breath, possibly out of tune. It's hard to tell with birds chirping and Brother Alric muttering threats toward invasive mint. The wind carries the scent of thyme hay and that ever-present trace of sheep. Then comes a sound you can't ignore, a donkey braying somewhere near the stables. Loud, dramatic, completely disproportionate to its actual workload. You glance toward the sound, and for a moment you remember the donkey, who once snuck into the cloister and ate an entire scroll of psalms. The novice responsible had to copy all 150 over again. Scholars still debate whether the donkey had good taste or just a thing for parchment. A quirky tidbit. Some monasteries kept bees not just for honey but also for wax used in candle making and seal crafting. These bees were often given names, and in one documented case a monk eulogized his favorite bee in a margin. You briefly wonder whether bees still enjoy Gregorian chants. Historians still argue whether the amount of labor performed by monks varied widely between abbeys or remained generally consistent across Europe. Some accounts suggest elite monasteries were more lenient, allowing wealthier monks to swap labor for study. Others maintain that no matter your background, you still ended up hauling compost with the rest. By late morning, your arms are sore and your hands stained with the memory of spinach. You pause for a moment by the cloister fountain, dipping your fingers into the cold stream. Water trickles with steady grace. You stare into its reflection, hooded, sleepy, a little smug for surviving beat duty, and feel a strange calm. You make your way back inside, washing up quickly with what qualifies as soap, a pungent lump of ash-laced lye that leaves your skin both clean and confused. Just in time for sext, the next round of prayers. Yes, it feels like you just finished the last round. No one is keeping count, except God, probably. This time you settle more easily into the rhythm. You can feel the ache of your knees against the stone floor, but your voice is stronger now, warmed by the morning's work. The notes rise and fall, like the breeze outside, soft and strange, wrapping around you like a woolen fog. Once prayers end, you catch sight of the refectory again. Could it be lunch? It is. You file in behind the others, taking your seat in near silence. A reader begins to speak from the pulpit, reading scripture or the life of a saint today. It's something about a bishop who once convinced geese to observe Lent. You chew carefully to avoid distraction. Your bowl holds a lentil stew thickened with barley, and what you sincerely hope is turnip. Bread sits beside it, yesterday's loaf lightly toasted by time. You dip and chew, letting your jaw do more of the work. Or than your brain, the taste is plain but not unpleasant. Simple food for a simple calling. You glance up at the vaulted ceiling. The light has changed sharper now, slanted from above. You realize the day is nearly halfway done, and somehow so are you. Across the room, a novice stifles a hiccup and knocks over his cup. It clatters, spills, and the abbot raises one eyebrow without lifting his head. Silence holds. The novice bows, red-faced, and begins to mop. The reader doesn't even pause. The meal ends with another prayer, because of course it does. You rise, your back cracking like the lid of an old Bible, and stretch your arms. Time to return to either scriptorium duty or more garden toil. A coin toss might decide it, or Brother Alric's mysterious schedule. The air outside has warmed. Bees bob between herbs. Chickens cluck in indignant harmony. You pass the stable again and nod to the donkey who appears to be plotting his next literary feast. And as you head back into the rhythm of prayer and labor and prayer again, you marvel just for a sleepy moment at the sheer constancy of it all. The way days blur but remain anchored, the way you somehow find comfort in cold feet, chanting psalms, and the endless battle against beats. You blink against the sunlight as you step back into the cloister. The stone arches offer just enough shade to keep your thoughts from evaporating, but not enough to escape the whisper of fatigue beginning to settle in your limbs. As the mid-afternoon bells toll, you know what comes next. Study copying illumination, the elegant monotony of the scriptorium. You shuffle down the long, echoing hallway that leads to it, passing frescoes that seem to watch you. A lion-eyed St. Mark peers from a wall mid-blessing or mid-judgment. You're never sure. You pull open the thick wooden door and are met with the scent of ink wax and human concentration. The scriptorium is cool, even in summer. Thick walls keep heat and noise out, creating a pocket of stillness inside the monastery's beating heart. You settle into your assigned desk, adjusting the angle just right. Sunlight pours in through a high window, illuminating your parchment, like divine approval, or at least divine assistance, since your candle stub ran out yesterday. You dip your quill into the inkwell, careful not to overdo it. One careless blotch, and a whole page becomes the world's most devotional paper towel. You start slowly calligraphy first, the Latin rolling out in looping strokes. You're transcribing the rule of St. Benedict today again. The irony doesn't escape you. Mainstream historical fact. Monasteries preserved much of the written knowledge of the ancient world, thanks to this careful copying. Without monks, like you hunched over desks for hours, many classical texts, Aristotle, Virgil, even our early medical treatises might have disappeared entirely during Europe's long medieval nap. You're not just tired, you're accidentally saving civilization. Your fingers cramp after a while, so you pause to flex them and steal a glance at Brother Hugo across the room. He's illuminating a capital letter the size of a pancake, his tongue poking out in concentration. Gold leaf glints under his brush. You have to respect a man who takes five hours to draw the letter L. A quirky tidbit. Some monks doodled in the margins of these sacred texts. Cats, knights fighting snails, rabbits jousting with ladles, true masterpieces of whimsical rebellion. You once saw a unicorn chasing a monk who, judging by the face, looked suspiciously like the abbot. No one admitted authorship. Historians still argue whether these marginalia were just idle fidgeting coded messages or a sort of monastic satire. You prefer to think of them as therapy. After all, there's only so many times you can write Pax Domini without losing your grip on reality. You shift again and continue. The quill scratches a steady rhythm, scritch, dip, blot, breathe. The desk wobbles slightly with every stroke, but you've long since adjusted your posture to compensate. Outside, a breeze rustles through the cloister garden. You can just hear the clucking of a chicken with misplaced confidence. After an hour or two, the abbot passes through inspecting work with the soft tread of someone who takes silent disapproval to an art form. He pauses behind Brother Hugo and nods. He pauses behind you and pauses a little longer. You try not to twitch. Eventually he moves on and you let out a breath that sounds like mild piety and panic in equal measure. The hours slide by like spilled ink. Eventually a bell rings again. None of you move at first. Limbs, stiff eyes, bleary minds filled with et dominus vobiscum. Then slowly, like a parade of elderly owls, you rise from your desks and file out. You're almost tempted to high-five Brother Hugo for finishing that ornate letter, but you settle for a respectful nod. This is still a monastery, not an art gallery. Back in the corridor, the smells of dinner preparation begin to drift toward you. onions, stewed lentils, and the ever-mysterious cabbage. Your stomach perks up like a hopeful hound. But first, another round of prayers. Vespers, the evening light service. You return to the chapel, where shadows lengthen across the stone floor. The choir stalls creak under your weight, but the chanting is more grounded now, fuller. Your voice joins the others, steady and sure, even if you're thinking mostly about cabbage. The air feels thick with incense and tired holiness. After Vespers, it's finally time for the evening meal. The refectory welcomes you again, the long tables set with wooden bowls and hunks of bread that feel like they were carved, not baked. Tonight, someone has added a handful of herbs to the stew, a bold culinary move. The reader begins another hagiography, this one involving a saint who reportedly turned rain into wine. Convenient. You eat quietly, the rhythm of the day still echoing in your bones. The stew is warmer than expected. The bread is stubborn but edible, and the moment is oddly peaceful. You glance down the table at a novice trying to drink soup without bending his neck. It's going poorly. After the final blessing, you rise again, this time more slowly. The day is winding down, but not quite over. One final duty remains: complain the last prayer of the day. You head to the chapel under a sky now painted in soft pinks and dusky blues. A bird chirps its final notes as you step inside. The air in the chapel feels heavier now, as though the stones themselves are sleepy. You kneel, your hands folded in quiet repetition. The words come softer now, murmured, almost mumbled. The candles flicker. Someone behind you sneezes. You choose to believe it's a prayer in disguise. When the final amen echoes through the hall, you exhale deep and slow. The day in its relentless loop of devotion, discipline, and very questionable stew is almost over. You rise and follow the others into the dormitory corridor, where the faint scent of wax and wool greets you like an old friend. Your cell is plain stone, straw mattress, thin blanket. A single candle flickers beside your pincho, your tiny wooden cross. You settle in, feeling the ache of muscles worked in labor, the buzz of hours spent hunched in the scriptorium, and the curious peace of knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring. You wake slowly to the muted gray light spilling through your small window. The chill of the stone walls seeps into your bones, nudging you gently awake. Outside, the distant crow of a rooster cuts through the morning stillness. You stretch carefully, mindful of the cramped quarters you call a cell, and prepare yourself for another day in the monastery. The morning routine begins with matins, the all-night prayer service you missed because, well, you actually need some sleep. Still, the early morning prayers offer a chance to reset, a moment to find calm before the workday officially kicks off. You trudge to the chapel, feet dragging a little, ears catching the soft murmur of chanting voices already rising like a low tide. Mainstream historical fact. Monks followed a strict schedule of prayer and work, famously summarized as ora et labora. Pray and work, a phrase that defined monastic life for centuries. This rhythm structured not just their day, but their entire existence, blending spirituality with labor in a seamless dance. After prayers, you head to the chapter house for a communal meeting. The abbot reads from the Rule of Saint Benedict, reminding everyone of their duties and encouraging humility, patience, and occasionally less grumbling about the cabbage. The atmosphere is a curious mix of solemnity and dry humor. Even saints had to contend with staff meetings. You're next assigned a task for the morning, working in the monastery's garden. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. You pull on your gloves and step into the sunlight, which feels unusually warm after the cool shadows inside. The garden bursts with life, herbs, vegetables, and flowers you never knew had so many medicinal uses. A quirky tidbit: monks were some of the earliest European gardeners to experiment with crop rotation and composting, pioneering what we'd now call sustainable agriculture. They even kept beehives, not just for honey, but for wax to make those flickering candles lighting your path. Historians still argue whether this agricultural knowledge was developed independently by monks or borrowed heavily from earlier Roman and even Islamic farming practices. You suspect it was probably a bit of both. Monks were practical and curious after all. As you tend to the soil, pulling weeds and carefully transplanting seedlings, you notice a small group of novices awkwardly trying to harvest lettuce without tearing it to shreds. It's like watching puppies learn to fetch, but with less fur and more dirt. The work is physical but meditative. The feel of earth between your fingers, the hum of bees overhead, the distant clatter of cloistered life, all of it combines into a gentle grounding rhythm. You pause for a moment, breathing deeply, the scent of thyme and rosemary filling your lungs. By late morning, your hands are dirty, your knees a bit scraped, and your spirit oddly lifted. You wash up in the small basin outside and head to the kitchen to help prepare the midday meal. The kitchen is a hub of controlled chaos, with pots clanging and the smell of freshly baked bread teasing your senses. You chop onions, grateful that your tears are for a noble cause rather than bad poetry. The cook grumbles about the shortage of salt, but everyone knows to be grateful for whatever's on the table. After all, a hot meal beats eating dry bread while chasing snails with a stick, which is apparently another monastic pastime. A scholarly debate. Some historians argue that monastic communities were more self-sufficient than previously believed, with complex economies and trade networks, while others think they relied heavily on donations and feudal obligations. You figure the truth probably slides somewhere between gardening and barter. The meal is simple but hearty: thick stew, coarse bread, and a piece of cheese that tastes faintly of the barn. You eat with your fellow monks in the refectory, the room echoing softly with quiet conversation and the occasional clatter of utensils. The reader's voice rises and falls, narrating the life of a saint who famously tamed a wolf. You wonder if that wolf ever enjoyed a good stew. After lunch, you return to your cell for a short rest or siesta, though you suspect the monks called it something more pious, like holy pause. You lie back on your straw mattress, feeling the day's work settle into your muscles, and let your mind drift with the gentle sway of the monastery's routine. In this slow, steady world, every small action, watering plants, copying manuscripts, preparing meals, is a prayer in motion, a thread in the fabric of a life lived quietly but fully. You smile to yourself already, knowing that tomorrow will bring the same humble rhythms, the same steady breath of cloistered life. The afternoon unfolds with the steady clack of quills on parchment. You find yourself in the scriptorium, where silence is the loudest sound. The air smells faintly of ink, parchment, and beeswax candles, an oddly comforting mix that seems to transport you away from the drudgery of everyday tasks. The scriptorium is where monks put their patience to the test, copying texts by hand with painstaking care. Each letter is a tiny work of art, a deliberate act of devotion. You grip your quill, careful not to smudge the fresh ink, and begin tracing the elegant strokes of Latin phrases that have been passed down through generations. Mainstream historical fact: monks preserved countless ancient texts during the Middle Ages, saving much of classical knowledge that might have otherwise been lost. These manuscripts became priceless treasures for future scholars and historians alike. A quirky tidbit: some monks had unique handwriting styles so distinctive that modern researchers can identify their work centuries later. Others included tiny doodles or marginalia, little drawings of cats, dragons, or even humorous caricatures, secretly adding personality to otherwise serious manuscripts. Historians still argue whether all manuscript copying was strictly devotional, or if some monks indulged in artistic flair to relieve the tedium. You imagine those scribbles as little acts of rebellion, tiny rebellions against the rigidity of monastic life. You squint at a particularly tricky passage and catch yourself daydreaming about modern life, like sending a text message instead of painstakingly rewriting every letter. Then again, you remind yourself no spell check in the monastery. As the afternoon light shifts, your eyes grow tired. The scriptorium windows are small and often dusty, filtering the sunlight into soft golden beams. You lean back, stretching your cramped fingers, and glance over at a fellow monk who is delicately painting miniature illustrations known as illuminations. His brushstrokes bring scenes of saints and angels to life, with dazzling colors that seem almost magical. The process is slow and exacting, requiring a steady hand and a calm mind. You wonder how long it takes to paint a single leaf on a painted vine or the tiniest halo around a saint's head. It feels like creating a whole universe within the margins of a page. The gentle scratch of quills, the faint scent of pigments, and the muted light create a cocoon of calm. It's a world apart from the noisy villages beyond the monastery walls where gossip and chores pull people in a dozen directions. You're reminded of an odd monastic custom. Some monks believe that copying texts was a form of prayer so powerful that it could help souls in purgatory speeding their journey to heaven. This mix of faith and work lends a sacred weight to your painstaking labor. As the afternoon drifts toward evening, you pause to clean your workspace and prepare for the next task. The abbot's voice echoes softly in the distance, signaling the approach of Vespers, the evening prayer service. You rise, feeling the stiffness in your back, and head toward the chapel, where the soft glow of candles awaits. The day's work melts away in the warm, flickering light, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment and the peaceful hum of chanting voices. Scholars debate how much creativity monks were allowed in their copying work, whether the illuminations were purely decorative or if they contained hidden messages and symbolism meant to teach or inspire. You think about the layers of meaning in those tiny paintings, and how even in the quietest corners of the monastery, life was full of surprises, secrets, and gentle beauty. Evening settles softly over the monastery, and you find yourself wandering the cloister, the covered walkway encircling the quiet courtyard. The cool stone beneath your feet contrasts with the gentle warmth of fading sunlight. You breathe in the crisp air, feeling the calm that only this space can bring, where centuries of whispered prayers seem to linger. The cloister is your daily meditation path, a place for walking slowly, thinking quietly, and sometimes catching a glimpse of a fellow monk lost in his own thoughts. You watch the vines crawl up the stone pillars, their leaves rustling softly like a secret shared between nature and the holy walls. Mainstream historical fact: cloisters were integral to monastic architecture, designed not just for practical use, but as a symbol of spiritual reflection and separation from the outside world. They created a protected space where monks could contemplate and find peace. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cloisters included fish ponds or small gardens meant for relaxation, and occasionally mischievous monks kept frogs or turtles as unofficial mascots, though the abbot probably frowned on that sort of thing. Historians still argue whether cloisters were truly places of tranquility, or whether they sometimes became hotbeds of gossip and secret meetings. You suspect a little of both. Monks are human after all. You meander slowly, feeling the weight of the day lift as shadows grow longer. Your fingers brush against the cool stone smoothed over centuries by countless hands. There's a comforting rhythm to this, a steady heartbeat beneath the quiet. As twilight deepens, you hear the soft tolling of the bells signaling Compline, the final prayer service before night. You join the small procession, moving back to the chapel, the flicker of candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Sitting in the quiet sanctuary, you reflect on the day's simple joys. The scent of fresh herbs, the whisper of the scriptorium, the gentle patience of the garden. These are the moments stitched together to make a life lived softly but deeply. A debate among scholars touches on whether monks' lives were more about strict discipline or about finding joy in simplicity. You lean toward the latter. Joy, after all, is often found in the smallest things. After Compline, you retreat to your cell. The night air cools the stone walls, and you settle into your narrow bed, the straw mattress less uncomfortable than you remember. You listen to the faint chorus of crickets outside the world beyond the monastery quietly breathing. Before sleep takes you, You think about the routine that will greet you tomorrow, another day shaped by prayer work and quiet reflection. It's a life far from the chaos of cities or the roar of battlefields, but it holds its own kind of adventure, gentle and profound. Your eyelids grow heavy, and as darkness deepens, you drift into dreams colored by candlelight and the soft rustle of ancient pages. The dawn chorus filters through your small window, soft and tentative, coaxing you gently awake. The cold stone of your cell feels sharper in the morning light, but the promise of a new day pulls you forward. You wrap your cloak tighter and step outside into the chill air, the monastery slowly stirring as you make your way toward the refectory. Breakfast is simple stale bread, watered-down ale, and perhaps a bit of cheese or porridge if the larder is generous. The monks gather silently, sitting shoulder to shoulder at long wooden tables, their murmured prayers mixing with the scrape of bowls and the clink of spoons. Mainstream historical fact. Monks followed strict dietary rules, often fasting or abstaining from meat on certain days, making meals a modest communal affair focused on nourishment over pleasure. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some monasteries employed a grace giver, a monk who recited elaborate prayers before meals, sometimes stretching the blessing into a theatrical performance to keep everyone alert. After all, a nap before work was not on the schedule. Historians still argue whether communal meals truly fostered unity, or if they became silent, tense affairs where unspoken rivalries simmered beneath the surface. You imagine a few mischievous glances exchanged over the crusty bread, the only rebellion allowed in this otherwise regimented life. After breakfast, you join the group headed to the infirmary. Today, your task is to assist the infirmarius, tending to monks who have fallen ill or simply require rest. The sickbay is a quiet, dimly lit corner of the monastery, filled with the scent of herbs and healing balms. You learn that monks weren't just spiritual guides, but also early medical practitioners. They grew their own medicinal plants and experimented with remedies handed down from ancient texts, though some treatments were more superstition than science. A peculiar fact, some monks believed that music and chanting could aid healing, and they would sing softly to patients, hoping the vibrations might soothe body and soul. The debate among scholars revolves around how effective medieval monastic medicine really was, whether it was a genuine precursor to modern practice or largely symbolic faith-based care. You tend to think it was a bit of both, with a dash of trial and error. As you help prepare herbal poultices, you notice the faint smile of an older monk who seems grateful for the company and care. There's a quiet dignity here, a reminder that even in the gentlest lives, hardship quietly weaves through. The morning drifts by, filled with soft footsteps and whispered prayers. You carry on, feeling the rhythm of monastic life settle deep into your bones. The afternoon sun filters through narrow windows as you return to the workshop area, a humble space where monks craft simple objects by hand. You pick up your tools, a carving knife, a length of wood, and begin the slow, repetitive motions of woodworking. The smell of fresh-cut timber fills the air, mingling with the faint aroma of beeswax and resin. Mainstream historical fact. Monks often produced goods such as furniture, candles, and illuminated manuscripts, contributing to the monastery's self-sufficiency and occasionally to local economies through trade. A quirky tidbit: some monasteries developed secret techniques or recipes for crafting certain items, passed down orally and guarded jealously, like a medieval version of a family business recipe for the perfect honey cake or a particular shade of ink. Historians still argue whether monks engaged in crafts primarily for practical reasons or as a form of meditative practice to deepen their spiritual connection. You imagine the rhythmic work carving not just wood, but carving out a space of calm in the mind. As you shape a small cross, you think about the long tradition behind such objects, how each piece, however simple, carries a story, and intention far beyond its material form. The workshop is quiet except for the steady tap-tap of chisels and the occasional murmur of prayer. You watch as another monk carefully dips a wick into melted wax, preparing candles for the chapel. These candles will burn during services, illuminating the sacred space and symbolizing divine light. There's a story whispered among monks that certain candles blessed in the monastery have healing powers, an idea that might make you chuckle if you weren't half inclined to believe in a little monastic magic. Scholars debate how much of these crafts were meant for spiritual use versus commercial purposes, whether the monastery was an economic hub hidden behind the walls of piety. The afternoon drifts on the steady work, soothing your thoughts. Your hands grow tired, but your mind clears the repetitive motion, a balm for any lingering worries. You remember the scriptorium's delicate brush strokes and the soft chanting from the chapel. Here in the workshop, the meditative silence is broken only by the sound of creation. As the sun lowers, you prepare to clean your tools, the wood shavings curling into delicate piles on the floor. There's satisfaction in seeing the small, tangible results of your labor, a reminder that even the gentlest lives are filled with quiet accomplishment. Soon the bell will call you back to the chapel for evening prayers, but for now you linger in this peaceful space, savoring the soft buzz of purposeful activity. The final hours of the day slip by in a soothing cadence as you prepare for the night's vigil. The monastery dims, torches flicker, and the scent of burning wax mingles with the cool evening air. You join the small group making its way to the chapel, where the soft glow of candlelight casts gentle shadows on ancient stone walls. Mainstream historical fact, night vigils were common in monastic life, involving hours of silent prayer and meditation, meant to foster spiritual vigilance and connection with the divine. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some monks believed that staying awake during vigils helped ward off evil spirits and nightmares, leading to a combination of serious devotion and a bit of folklore-inspired paranoia. Historians still argue whether these long nights were truly effective spiritual practices, or more a form of ascetic discipline bordering on self-torment. You sense a blend of deep faith and human endurance in the tradition. You settle into the quiet, feeling the steady rhythm of whispered prayers and the flickering light calming your thoughts. The world outside fades away, leaving only the sacred stillness and the soft chorus of voices lifted in devotion. This is the moment where the day's work, prayer, and reflection coalesce into a gentle peace. Your eyes grow heavy as the vigil progresses, the soft cadence lulling you toward rest. As you leave the chapel, the cool night air brushes your skin, carrying the faint scent of herbs from the garden. You walk slowly back to your cell, the silence of the monastery wrapping around you like a warm cloak. The routine that might seem monotonous from the outside reveals its quiet depth, the gentle rhythms of work, prayer, and community, weaving a life of meaning and calm. You lie down on your straw mattress, the faint moonlight filtering through your small window. The day's gentle labors and soft prayers drift away as sleep embraces you. Now as you rest, remember this slow, steady life, an existence far removed from chaos, filled instead with simple tasks, quiet reflection, and the soft pulse of ancient walls holding secrets and stories. Let your breathing slow, your mind soften, and your heart rest. You are part of a long tradition of gentle lives carried forward in the silence of the night. The night deepens and the gentle rhythm of the monastery fades into a soft, steady hum in the background of your thoughts. Imagine the cool stone walls surrounding you, holding centuries of quiet prayers, whispered hopes, and peaceful dreams. The flicker of candlelight, long extinguished now, seems to linger in your mind's eye, soft and warm. You are wrapped in calm like a slow-moving river carrying you gently downstream. The cares and noise of the outside world feel distant, almost unreal as you settle into this moment of rest. The breath you take is slow and even, a quiet anchor in the sea of silence. In the gentle lives of monks, you find a soothing reminder that simplicity holds its own kind of richness, and that peace is often woven from small, repeated acts of care and reflection. The day's work has been done, the prayers offered, and now the night invites you to release, to soften, to dream. Allow your thoughts to drift like leaves on a quiet stream, each one floating away without effort or concern. Feel the comfort of this shared humanity, the search for meaning, the striving for calm, and the deep desire to rest. Let your eyelids close, your muscles relax, and your mind drift into the soft embrace of sleep. You are safe, you are peaceful, and you are part of a story that flows through time as steady and gentle as the fading light.